Hello guys, welcome to my channel where stories filled with revenge, moral lessons, and love are told. Before I dive in, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you never miss a story that might just change how you see the world. 15 years. That's how long I had poured my life into that company. 15 years of learning its quirks, patching its glitches, protecting its contracts, and making sure not a single regulatory misstep could cost us our multi-million-dollar deals. My name is Clara Miles, and for most of my career, I was the silent backbone of a compliance system so old and complex it scared even the IT department. Everyone knew if that system failed, we'd be neck-deep in legal trouble before sunrise. Everyone. Except my new manager, Adrian Cole. Adrian had been in the building for just 2 months, 2 shiny, noisy, arrogant months. He had the kind of smile that made you check for missing wallets and the kind of vocabulary stuffed with corporate buzzwords no one understood. We need to synergize processes. We'll streamline the back end. I believe in agile transformations. He would talk for 20 minutes without actually saying anything. And then one rainy Tuesday morning, without a hint of warning, he called me into his office. "Clara, I appreciate your years of service," he began, leaning back in his chair like a movie villain about to announce a plot twist. "But the truth is, the company is moving in a new direction. The system you've been managing, it's outdated. We're bringing in fresh talent who can handle this with a modern approach." I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. "Adrian, that system holds $240 million in government contracts. It's not something you can just modernize in a week. There's no documentation, no handover notes. You can't even log in without knowing which submenus unlock the verification protocol." He smirked. "It's a computer program, Clara. How hard can it be? We've got Melissa, our new intern, starting next week. She's a fast learner." I felt my stomach turn cold. Melissa was a bright kid, barely 21, and barely out of college. She didn't even know what compliance meant when I first met her. But Adrian didn't want logic. He wanted obedience. "So that's it?" I asked, my voice low. 15 years, and you're tossing me aside for an intern?" He folded his hands. "We'll pay you for the rest of the month, of course. HR has your paperwork ready. You can hand in your badge today." The thing about working with fragile systems for years is you learn to prepare for the day when people stop listening. 2 years ago, I had quietly built a protocol into the system's architecture. If my administrator token was revoked and no certified custodian replaced me within 36 hours, the system would automatically lock down every contract file, every payment queue, every procurement invoice. Frozen. Untouchable. And to lift that lockdown? Federal oversight. I didn't do it out of malice. It was compliance law. The government required a named custodian for sensitive contract systems, and if that person left without a replacement being verified, the safest move was to stop everything before unauthorized access occurred. So when I walked out of that office, handed over my badge, and collected the small cardboard box with my belongings, I kept my face neutral. But in my head, I knew the clock had just started ticking. 36 hours. The rain was heavier by the time I stepped outside. I stood there for a moment, letting the cold drops soak through my coat, staring up at the steel gray sky. I thought about the people I actually liked in that building: Cynthia in payroll, old Mr. Harris in procurement, good folks who would be caught in the crossfire of Adrian's arrogance. But I also thought about every night I stayed late without overtime pay, every weekend I came in to fix a crash, every time I warned management about the dangers of cutting corners. And how in the end none of it mattered to them. By the time I got home, my phone was already buzzing. Emails from Adrian, HR, and even Melissa, asking for passwords and quick instructions. I didn't answer. I couldn't answer. The rules were clear. Once my token was deactivated, I was legally barred from accessing or sharing anything without a verified transfer process. And they hadn't done that. I spent the evening in my small kitchen, brewing tea and listening to the rain hammer against the windows. Every so often, my phone would light up with another message. By midnight, the tone had shifted from polite requests to urgent demands. The next morning, a friend from the IT department, Mark, called me from his personal phone. His voice was low, urgent. "Clara, what did you do? Procurement can't process payments. The contract portal's throwing access errors. Adrian's losing it. I sipped my tea. I didn't do anything. The system did exactly what it's supposed to do when compliance isn't maintained. Mark gave a short laugh, half in disbelief, half in awe. You mean the lockdown protocol? You actually enabled it. I enabled it to protect the company, I said evenly. And the government contracts. If they wanted a smooth handover, they should have done it properly. By the end of that day, they were in full scramble mode. I could picture Adrian pacing the hall, snapping at Melissa, sending frantic emails to IT vendors who'd take one look at the system and declare it unfixable without the custodian key. And I knew this was only the beginning. I wasn't celebrating. Not yet. But there was a quiet satisfaction in knowing the storm was gathering, and I wasn't the one standing in its path anymore. By the time the sun rose on the second day, the 36-hour clock had already devoured half its time. I didn't need to be in that building to feel the tension brewing inside it. You can tell a company's heartbeat from the way people call you shorter greetings, quicker breaths, voices that tighten on certain words. And the calls that came to me that morning told me the patient was flatlining. Melissa tried first. Clara, she said in a rush, I think something's wrong with the system. I can't get into the contract management panel. It says, access denied, no active custodian. What does that even mean? I could hear the tremor in her voice. She wasn't part of the power play. She was a pawn shoved onto a battlefield she didn't understand. Melissa, I said gently, that message means there's no verified administrator. The government requires one for any access. Until that's fixed, the system will keep shutting you out. But Adrian said. She stopped, as if realizing she'd said too much. He told me to call you. He said maybe you could walk me through. I can't, I interrupted softly. The moment I was removed, the law bound my hands. Without a formal transfer process logged with the Federal Compliance Registry, any guidance from me would be a breach. That's not just a policy, it's a criminal charge. She was silent for a beat, then whispered, he's not going to like that. No, I thought he really won't. An hour later, Adrian himself called. The slick charm from our last meeting had been stripped away. Clara, he snapped, you need to come in. Now, the system's gone haywire. Harris can't process invoices, payroll's frozen, procurement's screaming, and our government liaison is demanding status reports we can't give. I'm not your employee anymore, I reminded him. And even if I wanted to help, you didn't certify a custodian before you revoked my access. That triggered the compliance lockdown. His voice sharpened. You did this on purpose. No, I said, keeping my tone calm. I built a safeguard into the system because it's required. The government needs to know its contracts are in safe, verified hands. That means someone's name approved, registered, trained must be tied to those keys at all times. You removed me without replacing me. The system did exactly what it's designed to do. There was a hiss of static, then a low growl. You think this is funny? We're losing millions. I cut him off. You thought it was easy. You thought anyone could do my job. Now you're learning why that wasn't true. He hung up without another word. By midday, the fallout was in full swing. My friend Mark sent me a photo blurry, taken from behind a pillar in the lobby. Adrian was standing in the middle of a circle of executives, his face red, one hand jabbing the air while the other clutched his phone. The caption read, "The sharks smell blood." It wasn't just internal chaos. By the afternoon, the federal compliance officers had been notified. That was the part no one inside that company understood until it was too late. Once the government knew about a custodian gap, they didn't wait for the company to fix it. They froze every active and pending contract to prevent unauthorized access. That meant nothing could move. No shipments, no service calls, no invoices. It was as if someone had sliced every wire in the building and left them flailing in the dark. The funny thing was, I wasn't feeling vindictive. I was strangely detached. I sat by my window with a pot of chamomile tea, reading a book I'd been meaning to finish for months. Every so often, my phone would buzz with another update from Mark or a voicemail from someone in a panic. I didn't rush to answer. I didn't need to. That evening the tone shifted again. HR called, not the brisk, clipped woman who'd handed me my termination papers, but the head of the department, a man I'd met only twice in 15 years. His voice was smooth, rehearsed. "Clara, we'd like to bring you back in as a consultant. Just temporarily. We'll pay your old rate plus a bonus if you can resolve this quickly." I could have said yes. I could have walked back into that building, fixed the mess in an hour and walked out richer. But that wasn't the point. I'd given them years of my life, saved them from crisis after crisis, and been discarded without a second thought. My expertise had been worth nothing to them, until it was the only thing standing between them and ruin. "I'm sorry," I told him, "but I've moved on. And without a certified transfer process in place, I couldn't help you even if I wanted to. That's federal law." There was a pause. "Is there anyone else who could be certified quickly?" "No one you have on staff," I said. "Certification takes weeks, sometimes months. And training someone to handle the system? Even longer." When I hung up, I realized the countdown had only a few hours left. By dawn, the lockdown would be total. Mark called me one last time before the clock hit 0. "They're trying to contact the CEO directly," he said. "Apparently she's cutting her vacation short. She's furious." "Good," I replied. "Maybe she'll finally understand what I've been saying for years." That night, I slept soundly for the first time in months. No late-night calls, no emergency pings from the office, no anxiety about waking up to another problem only I could fix. The burden had been lifted not by choice, but by force. And as far as I was concerned, they could carry it themselves now. When the sun rose the next morning, I knew the lockdown had taken full effect. The calls started again almost immediately, but I didn't pick up. I let them pile into a neat little list of missed opportunities, each one a reminder of how quickly respect disappears until desperation demands it back. What I didn't know yet was that the CEO herself was about to step into the chaos, and when she did, she wouldn't be asking politely. She'd be demanding, loudly, to know exactly where I was. The first sign that the storm had finally broken came from Mark's early morning message. It was just 2 words, but they were heavy enough to pull me fully awake. "She's here." I didn't need to ask who everyone in that building knew that when Evelyn Hart, our CEO, showed up without warning, it meant the situation had slipped far past ordinary control. By the time I made myself coffee, my phone was vibrating on the table like a trapped insect. First came Melissa, her voice shaky and rushed. "Clara, she's walking the halls like actually walking the floors. She just slammed Adrian's office door so hard the frame rattled. She's asking, 'Where is she? Where is Clara Miles?' over and over." I took a slow sip of coffee, letting the steam fog my glasses. "And what did Adrian say?" Melissa hesitated. He tried to explain, but she cut him off. Said, "I don't want excuses, I want my compliance administrator." She's scary, Clara. Not yelling, just sharp. Like she already knows the answer, and wants to see if you'll lie to her. I almost felt bad for Melissa. Almost. She wasn't the villain in this story. She was just the collateral damage of Adrian's arrogance. But Evelyn Hart wasn't there for Melissa. She was there because a $240 million lifeline had been severed overnight, and the government was circling like hawks over the mess. Not long after, my phone rang again, this time from an unfamiliar number. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later it rang again. And again. On the 4th try, curiosity one. "Clara Miles." The voice was low, crisp, and unmistakably in control. Evelyn Hart had a way of speaking that made you sit up straighter, without realizing it. "Yes," I said carefully. "This is Evelyn Hart. I understand you were removed from your position without a proper transition." She didn't phrase it as a question. She stated it like a fact she'd already confirmed. "We are now facing a total compliance lockdown. Federal officers are in the lobby. And I have been informed this is due to a protocol you implemented. Is that correct?" "It's the federal protocol," I corrected. "Not mine. My job was to ensure we met compliance standards, which included that safeguard. Removing the custodian without a certified replacement automatically triggers the lockdown. It's not optional." There was a pause on the other end. I imagined her pacing, one heel clicking against the marble floor. "Can you reverse it?" "Not without breaking federal law," I said evenly. And even if I could, I'm no longer employed there. You'd have to reinstate me, process a full custodian transfer, and register it with the compliance office. That process takes time. I can authorize your reinstatement immediately, she said. Then you'd still need the registration approval. And that doesn't happen in an hour. You'd be looking at a minimum of 3 days for expedited processing, longer if the officers decide to dig into why there was a gap. The silence stretched for several seconds, and I could almost feel her mind working through the damage. 3 days meant missed deadlines, breached contracts, financial penalties. It meant explaining to investors why a single point of failure had been treated like a replaceable cog. When she spoke again, her voice had softened, not in kindness, but in a way that told me she'd shifted tactics. Clara, I'm going to be frank. We can pay you whatever you want to come in and guide us through this. You name it. It was tempting. For a flicker of a moment, I pictured walking back into that office, every pair of eyes turning toward me, Adrian shrinking in the corner. I could fix it. I could have my vindication in full view of everyone. But then I thought about the years I'd spent being the quiet fixer, the invisible savior who never got credit until something went wrong. And I realized walking back in would give them the chance to wipe the slate clean, to treat this as a lesson learned, instead of the reckoning it truly was. I appreciate the offer, I said. But my answer is no. This was avoidable. I warned management for years about the risk. They didn't listen. I'm not stepping in to shield them from the consequences now. Her inhale was sharp. You understand the company could collapse over this. Yes, I said simply. And maybe the next one will value its people more. There was nothing left to say. I ended the call. From then on, I didn't answer any more numbers I didn't recognize. Through Mark, I heard how the day unraveled. Federal officers set up in the main conference room. Adrian was pulled into closed-door meetings for hours, emerging only to bark orders that no one could follow because the system remained sealed. Payroll bounced. Vendors withdrew. Clients called in panic. And Evelyn Hart, for all her authority, couldn't order the lockdown undone without playing by the very rules she'd once left me to enforce alone. By Friday, the company had gone into full damage control, sending out vague press statements about system upgrades and temporary delays. But the truth was leaking: government contracts suspended, investigations underway, millions bleeding out by the hour. Adrian was quietly escorted out, his access revoked, his arrogance finally catching up to him in the form of a cardboard box. I didn't celebrate with champagne or a victory dance. That's not who I am. Instead, I took a walk through the park near my apartment, the winter air sharp in my lungs, the bare trees standing like quiet witnesses. The world was still turning. I was free. And somewhere downtown, a building full of people was learning the cost of underestimating the quiet ones. That night I brewed myself another pot of tea and sat at my desk, watching the city lights blink in the distance. I wasn't thinking about revenge anymore. I was thinking about dignity, about the quiet power in letting people face the weight of their own mistakes. And if I'm honest, I was thinking about how good it felt to finally lay down a burden I'd carried alone for far too long. Moral lesson and closing for video. Sometimes revenge doesn't come in the form of shouting matches or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes it's in the stillness, in the unshakable choice to let people live with the mess they created. This story isn't about malice. It's about the quiet strength of knowing your worth, holding to your principles, and refusing to be drawn back into a place where those values were ignored. We often underestimate the people who keep things running in the background, forgetting that their silence isn't weakness, it's mastery. And when that mastery is gone, the world notices. So if you're watching this and you've ever felt invisible in your work, remember, you are not replaceable simply because someone says you are. The knowledge, integrity, and dedication you bring are your quiet superpowers. And one day, those who ignored them may wish they had listened. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment below about the lesson you're taking away, because sometimes, the quietest voice carries the loudest truth.